I'm gonna talk about tools for small farms, and some of the tools I'm going to show you are not that small. So just a word of warning there. I don't think of them necessarily as a tool directly for the small farm, but I want to give people ideas of kind of what's out there. And a lot of this stuff can be scaled down. So I don't necessarily have pictures of the scaled down versions, but there's a lot of overlap. And I actually, I'm also going to, initially I wasn't going to do any cultivation tools in this one, but we skipped over a few of the cultivation tools at the end of yesterday. So I have a little insert in the middle here where we'll go back through some of those cultivation tools that I missed yesterday. I also have found that I started out basically as a gardener, and then I went and I worked on farms where I was doing maybe 10, 15 acres, setting up tractor systems for those, and then worked with some farms that are even larger than that. And then I went back to working with the hand scale tools entirely for a number of years and wasn't working with a tractor at all. But what I found was that I actually learned a lot about working with hand tools when I was working with the tractor. So what was possible out in the field, I was then able to adapt some of those techniques to my hand work and be much more efficient in the field. So even if you're on a hand scale, take a look at the tractor stuff, see what people are doing, because a lot of it's set up very efficiently and it actually does translate into hand technique. One other thing that I want to make very clear is that tools are just tools. And what's really important about the tool is how it fits into your system. And whether it fits with your system is one piece of that, and also whether or not you can design a system that efficiently uses the tool. So the system is really the big piece, the really important piece, and the tool is just a part of getting that system to work. So there's a lot of other pieces besides the tool itself. The tool's not going to solve the problem for you if you don't have the system in place to use the tool efficiently. I don't have a lot of pictures of hand tools, but I have this one picture of a lot of hand tools. So this is my shed from when I was doing the farm all by hand, and this is the collection. I think there's a pointer up here. So for tillage, I was using primarily a fork like this, and then this blue rake, I've got a picture of that later. The combination of the fork and the rake, that was how I was preparing beds. And I had, in special scenarios, I would use this bigger, longer rake, and I had another rake, and I had a couple of different forks and spades and that kind of thing. So those are the two main tools. And then I had a couple of really heavy hoes, which I'll show in some other pictures, and then some lightweight hoes for weeding. And that was the majority of the hand tools that I was using kind of for field work. There's a bunch of other things there, cedar and knives and all kinds of things, and I'll show some pictures of those as we go along. Okay, so these are tools from the farm that I'm at now, our table, and I actually just took these about 3 days ago. So yesterday I was showing a system for the weed control and talking about how bed preparation and the way that we were preparing the beds was very important in terms of keeping our weed pressure down. And the spading machine was the machine that we were using on that farm. The spading machine I mentioned yesterday has, it's a fantastic machine in a lot of ways, but it has some drawbacks. One is that you have to drive it very, very slow, and I'm patient, so that doesn't bother me too much. But the thing that tests my patience is that it has a lot of bearings, and those bearings like to go bad, and even if you maintain them, they like to go bad, which means that you have to replace the bearings fairly often. And it's a major, major disassembly project to repair the spading machine. So a little bit more durable and more commonly available setup is a chisel plow. So that'll break up the soil deeply, and then a rototiller, which is this piece right here. Another thing I want to point out is this A-frame right here that we have. So these are pretty expensive, but they're really, really nice, and I consider them a safety feature. And what it is it's a quick disconnect, and there's different versions of this. This one's a Delta. It's typically, the generic term is a Delta system. There's a company that's actually called Delta Hook. This particular one, I think, is called a jiffy hitch. But essentially all you do is you back the tractor up, there's a mating piece on the tractor, and you just lift that mating piece into that triangular, and then it actually latches itself when it lifts up, and then you pick up the implement. So if anybody here has changed implements on the back of the tractor, it's one of the most dangerous things you can do. It's also one of the things that you can do to screw up your back the fastest, because these are big, heavy pieces of steel, and you're always in an awkward position trying to maneuver it just into the right position. And it seems like you should be able to do that, and then your back doesn't feel so good afterwards. So this saves your back, and it's also a safety feature because you don't have to be hanging out there behind the tractor and worrying. Even more dangerous if there's two people, one person operating the tractor and the other person trying to hook it up. So we have mating pieces on. You'll notice each one of these pieces of equipment has the mating piece, and then there's a piece on the tractor that slips into that.
What is it?
There's another piece that looks like this that just kind of slides up. This is actually a channel. You can see this is channel, and so there's kind of this is the female piece, and then there's the male piece that just slides. It's triangular also. It slides up in there, and then there's this little hole on the side. There's another hole on that side. There's a little latch that slips through that hole to make sure that it doesn't pop back off. You do still have to hook up the PTO shaft manually, but that's fairly minor. This piece of equipment over here is a flail mower, and I think I mentioned flail mowers yesterday, and they chop things up nicely, leave them very flat on the ground. That one's made by Rears, which is actually a manufacturing company that's just south of us, and they make fantastic flail mowers. There's a wide range of flail mowers, from very light grass mowers, which are more commonly available, much less expensive, a lot less steel, all the way up to flail mowers, which are essentially chippers that they'll drive through orchards, over the orchard prunings to chip all the prunings. And those things can be enormous and take hundreds of horsepower tractors. Sometimes they even have their own motors. This is a model that's 5 feet wide. It probably takes about it takes at least 30 horsepower, but it's more comfortable on a 50 horsepower tractor. And there's our tractor up there. A few years ago, well, maybe more than a few now, I started driving somebody else's tractor that had a cab on it, and it's really hard to go back after you've driven somebody's driven a tractor with a cab. We have a couple of other pieces that we use occasionally, so much faster if I don't need as fine a bed surface or I'm just trying to work in cover crop seed or something like that. I use this light disc here, which also hooks onto the 3-point. You'll notice it doesn't have we don't use it very often, so we don't have that expensive mating piece on it. And a ring roller, that's for flattening out the field before I spread seed or pushing the seed into the surface, so that helps with germination. I really, really love electric utility carts. You don't have to warm them up. They'll go all day on a battery charge. You just plug them in at night. They only go about 15 miles an hour, but out in the field, you don't really want to be driving with chest in there a lot of times. Super, super maneuverable, and they have a really good payload. And most of them come with a dump, so this one has an electric dump on it. We use hand carts a lot, and I designed this particular hand cart, and there's a lot more information on that, and a lot more information that I need to get on that on farmhandcarts.com, which is a site that I put out. The design for a basic version of this is there, and then this is a very adjustable version that I'm hoping to get the design out for at some point, but there's also a manufacturing or fabricator in town in Portland that I work with that will build these. And they're just bicycle wheels, so it's very simple parts. And they sit fairly flat and a little bit more ergonomic, and they hold a lot more than a garden cart, so it's kind of a jacked up version of a garden cart. If anybody has any questions about these while I'm going, also feel free to. This is just a picture of that garden cart that's got a tow hitch on a cargo bicycle. I'll talk about that a little more in just a second. So we're building lots of different parts of those carts. This is an interesting new tool that we just got on the farm and just started being manufactured in Corvallis down south of us. So it's kind of like they actually have two different versions of it. This one's called the Tilly, and it's got a battery right here, and then it's got an electric hub motor and tines down here. So it kind of works like a little teeny rototiller. I don't know if anybody's used a Mantis before, but it'll actually rotate very slowly. So you have a trigger by your finger right here, and you can adjust how quickly it's going. So you can use it like a wheel hoe where you just kind of go down and till the pathway, or you can kind of lay it on its side and it'll throw dirt back a little bit. So we were using it actually to fill these leaks. So you can see this is the line that hasn't been done, and this is the line that has been done, right there. So that's a neat tool. It's brand new, so I don't want to say anything about how well it's going to work for us in the system or how long it lasts or anything like that. They're still making a lot of design improvements to it. They're playing with lots of different.
Is it used mostly for weeding?
It's mostly for weeding. Yeah, you could on a garden scale you could use it for preparing a bed. Also, it won't go very deep. It'll only go a couple of inches deep if you really want to. It's designed to do that, but it works better if you're just doing it very superficially, like a top inch or so. This slide here is I put that in because it's got this green stuff all over it, and I highly recommend if you're using hand carts or bicycles around the farm or anything like that, getting slime for the tubes. This is where slime has failed, but this is a totally rare scenario. What actually happened here is that the tire was probably about 20 years old, and I pumped it up, and the tire exploded. So the slime won't prevent that, but what it does prevent is it prevents leaks from punctures, and it also holds the air into the tire better, so you don't have to pump them up as often. And you can put it in any tire. It's not just bicycle tires, but bicycle tires tend to go flat more often. So like if you have hand trucks or that kind of thing where you're getting flat tires frequently, or hand carts, slime is really great for that. And you just have to make sure that you have a Schrader valve, which is the common valve on most equipment. And it's non-toxic. It's basically nylon, pieces of nylon that are in an alcohol gel, and that those little pieces of nylon kind of get stuck in holes as it tries to go out, and the alcohol gel keeps it so that it's not flowing all around the tire. I had a nail in my bicycle tire, and I pulled the nail out, and it started leaking, and I spun the tire, and it stopped leaking, and I put about 5,000 more miles on that tire since then, and I've never had to repair it. Little hand clipper that I got this last season, and we use this for clipping herbs, but you can potentially use it for other things. The thing I really like about it is when you're not using it, it's still on your hand, and it just has this little thumb latch that latches it closed. So that's a neat little tool.
Do you know what brand it is?
So I got that from Hida Tool, HIDA tool.com. And they're a importer of Japanese tools, and I think this is for thinning grapes. That's what the picture was on the box when I got it. Another picture. So I do all my delivery. I consider my delivery kind of a quarter of what our CSA is. Other people do delivery in cars. I do it with an electric assist cargo bicycle, so that I ride that about 60 miles twice a week, doing deliveries of vegetables. There's another picture of the hand cart that we have, and it's modular, so this thing pops off, and then we have a marker there, and we use the wheel spacing to mark out the pathways, and then that rolling marker, kind of like the rolling marker I showed yesterday, marks out the planting. And we had also used this cart, so there's the flatbed right there that's normally on it. It just pops off, and we pop the other thing on there, so we bring all the plantings to the carts. I like these knives. These are what we use for vegetable harvest. They are Mora knife, which is Morakniv. And the knife itself, it's got a really nice, comfortable handle. And this one has a very thin stainless blade. Most of them have heavier blades. They make tons and tons of blade shapes. The thing that's fantastic about this, though, is not the knife itself. The knife is good, but it has this plastic sheath. So for sanitation, it's easy to put that in a dishwasher and wash that sheath, and then you always have a sheath. It clips onto your belt or your pants or whatever you have, and it actually stays in place. And when you put the knife in, it kind of clicks into place and it stays in. And these knives, they're less than $15, so they're pretty cheap. So that's what we use. And then I don't know if you can see it on here. I think you can. We take a paper clip and bend it into our initials or our mark, and then we heat it up with a lighter, and then we brand all the knives. So everybody has their own knife, and it's got their brand in it, and the sheath has the brand in it also, so that if you find somebody's knife in the field, you know who the culprit was. Also, when everybody goes to collect their knives, and they've all been set on the same bench, then it's not like, oh, mine was the sharp one, and yours was the dull one. A couple of other things here. So this is just a homemade bender we do hoops, and you can make these in any size. So Johnny sells a bender, which is a little more expensive for bending this EMT into hoops, but it only comes in 2 sizes, and we wanted a different size, so we just made one out of plywood that was sitting around. Single row version of that cart, and then this is a simple root washer that I built just using 2 bicycle rims, attaching some wood to it, and those are sitting on some rollers. Yeah.
Why do you use metal hoops instead of plastic?
We use metal hoops because they last a lot longer and they're a lot more durable, and they're easier to push in and out of the ground. And I don't like plastic. The other thing about plastic, if you're using PVC, PVC actually off-gases a little bit, and it's not UV stable, so it'll break down over a few years. And that off-gassing actually, if you are using PVC with plastic, which we don't do so much, we mostly do floating or cover, but doing it with plastic, that off-gassing will actually negatively impact the plastic, and the plastic won't last as long. But I do know people that use plastic PVC hoops, and what they've done is they've painted the PVC first, and if you paint the PVC first, then there's not that interaction with the plastic, and it's also UV protected, so it won't degrade. So they've had houses up that are PVC houses that have been up for 20 years, and they're still fine. This is that rake, that head of that rake. So if you're looking for a good rake, this is 16 inches wide. It's 2 inches between the tines. DeWitt, very, very long handle. I get it from Volk Tools. The shipping is outrageous because the handle is so long, so it's oversized shipping. The shipping is almost as good as the rake. Heavy hoe this is called farmer hoe. If you're doing any kind of chopping, I used to use this one quite a bit. It's a really nicely balanced tool. It's a Japanese version. But there's other chopping hoes. For chopping, you want something with a handle that goes through a socket like this. And the common one is a grape hoe or a grubbing hoe, called an eye hoe a lot of times. There's also a U.S. manufacturer that's recycling agricultural discs and making hoes out of them called Rogue Hoe. And there are 55F and 75F are my new favorites. I don't have a picture of them, unfortunately, but for chopping hoes, fantastic. So anytime you have like a bigger weed in the field where you need to chop it out, or you actually need to move some dirt, those are the hoes that I go for. This is a broad fork. I actually don't use a broad fork very much. I just use a regular fork like that. But they're using it for harvesting carrots in that particular scenario. That's also if you're doing rototilling on a small scale, like in a hoop house or something like that, and you start to get a pan, the broad fork is probably the fastest way to break up that pan. There's better ones that are two-handled that I've seen that are being manufactured now in different places on the West Coast that have metal handles and flatter tines that are just much, much heavier construction. These tend to bend in really heavy conditions, and I've seen one that only has 2 tines left on it, the rocky soil. You guys have rocks up here?
Josh, that heavy rake,
Yeah.
what are you using that for?
I'm using it for finishing seed beds, but the other thing, I pointed out the rake yesterday on the tractor. So one of the things that I've learned is if I have wide spaces, that actually raking, using a rake like this, or even a leaf rake, or a regular garden rake, just raking the surface and loosening up that surface and pulling out those thread weeds is a very, very fast way to cover a lot of ground. So when we're cultivating a squash field, for example, we don't go in with hoes, we go in with rakes, and we rake the surface for our first few cultivations. I'll just go back to that for just a second. So essentially for me, the spading fork or a broad fork is doing what the chisel plow would do, and the rake is doing what the rototiller would do on the surface. We also have a BCS, which is this, these are called two-wheel tractors. So they're different than a rototiller that has a dedicated rototiller because you can swap implements out. And so it's got a PTO and it's got a mount for different implements. You can mount different implements. So this one actually has what's called a rotary plow on it, and that's a tool that it basically is kind of like an auger that's short, but you move the auger through the ground, and so it's throwing the soil off to one side. So we're breaking sod with it in this picture, and it works very well for breaking sod. I've also used it for hilling potatoes. You can kind of go down one side of the potatoes and throw dirt over onto the potatoes, and then go down the other side of the potato row and throw dirt onto the road that way. I've never seen one of these before, but I was anywhere else. But I guess they make brushes for them also. We have a rototiller for ours. We have a flail mower for ours, which works very, very well. It goes off the front, so it's before the wheel track, so the wheels aren't pounding down the material and then the flail going over it. And then you can get carts for them also, and this is not a BCS, this is actually a bigger two-wheel tractor. I was just in Cambodia in December, and these are all over the roads, hauling all kinds of loads. So there's basically a little hitch in the back of it, and then if you have a two-wheel cart that's towed by it, it basically works like a four-wheel truck, and you just steer with the handlebars. There is a person in there, too. Here's what the chisel plow and rototiller look like in the field. So that's chiseling one of our fields, and then this is actually a different farm where they're rototilling and corn stubble right there. So it's called the rototiller the giant eraser. I think that was Alex Coleman's term. Here are the hoe heads that I really like. Actually, this one I don't like so much. I don't use it, but it's a really popular one. It's called a hula hoe. It's made by Glasser, which is a really excellent tool manufacturer. It's good on hard soil, but it makes you bend over a little bit. And I find that people who haven't hoed a lot before really like it because they can see the edges. They can see what the outside edges of where it's going are. I like something that reaches in underneath plants. And this swan neck is my favorite. If I just had one hoe, that would be the one. It's heavy enough that you can do light chopping with it, but it's light enough that it doesn't get too heavy if you're doing a lot of space. And it's designed to use this thumbs up position that Kai is demonstrating here, and the blade just slides under the ground, so you're kind of just slicing very, very shallow, not even a quarter inch, just right under the surface, and disturbing the soil. It's going down a row growth there. The collinear hoe is very, very similar, so we use this in more delicate situations, but it's way too light to do any kind of chopping. But the benefit is that it'll fit into tighter spots, and it's much, much lighter, so it's less of a energy drag after a couple of hours of mowing. And then this is a diamond scuffle hoe, so this is designed to be pushed and pulled through the soil, and it's got these sharp tips on it that really get up right against the plant. Only you have to be careful, you have to be skilled to know where that is, because when it's underground, you can't see it. Another hoe that I like quite a bit is this hoe right here. I apologize, this isn't a very good picture, but it's got this blade that kind of hoops around, so you can see the edge on one side, and you can't see the edge on the other side. So you can reach under plants one direction, or if you want to get up really close to plants but know exactly where that edge is, you can run the other direction. And it also works on both push and pull. And they you never have to sharpen it, and I thought that was totally ludicrous, but I've been using it for about 3 years now, and I've never sharpened it. It's still quite sharp. It's made out of stainless steel, and so the stainless actually sheds wet soil better, so it doesn't clog as much as other hoes clog. It's called a heron hoe. Like the bird, a heron. And it's made by the company, I don't understand their naming, but it's Holdridge Enterprises, but they go under the name Hook and Crook. So if you look up Hook and Crook or Holdridge Enterprises and heron hoe, you can find it. They're made in New York, and I don't know if they have their manufacturing cycle down entirely yet. I had to wait about 4 months the last time I ordered one. But the quality is really good. Yeah.
What was that other hoe?
Going back?
The one that you said was really light. Yeah, not the swan.
This one? Not this one. This one.
Yeah, what was the name of that?
That's a collinear hoe. Yeah, and Glasser also makes those. Glaser. Johnny's Selected Seed is a company that I order a lot of stuff from. They're in Maine, and they carry them. There's other people that carry them also.
Josh?
Yeah.
Can you talk about how you do the hoe?
How I hoe?
Well, because we had a woman on our farm this summer who, she was like really into the technique of how you hoe.
Yeah, so it depends on the hose. I mean, you can see most of the hose that I use are like this collinear or the swan neck, and the technique is thumbs up, and you want a really long handle for that, so the long handle is important on that hoe, and it's basically like this. And really, I mean, the technique is you're going in there often. These weeds are a little bigger than I'd like to see. They're kind of at the outside edge of what I'd like to see. So if you're not, that's what this hoe is designed for, is weeds that are that size or smaller. And you're just sliding it right under the surface of the ground. And I cover all the ground, whether it has a weed in it or not. I'm just walking along with that. I might be going back and forth a little bit if it's clogged. You have to change your technique depending on soil conditions.
That hoe that he's using is one of those.
Yeah, it's this swan neck right here. It's this one right here. Yeah. And you can't see, the blade is just under the surface of the ground. Yeah. That's a whole workshop in itself. I toss these in there because I have them. I try to avoid them at all costs, which is a kind of hand weeders. If you're having to use a hand weeder, you're spending too much time, is my opinion. But these Japanese scrapers here, which you can also get from Haida Tool and other places, those are really great if you're doing that. And then this is sometimes called a hotbed weeder, and for very, very tight spaces, that can be a good tool. You can use the broad side here, which is longer, or you can use this side here, which is a little bit shorter, or you can just use the tip, which is really, really short. Flaming was something that I wanted to talk about a little bit. So the standard flamer, which we actually use on the farm, I don't have a picture of, but it's just a single wand with one of these burners right here. We use a backpack, like a frame on a backpack to hold a 5-gallon can, and then there's a trigger on it. There's a pilot switch, and then we have a trigger, and that turns it on full blast. And we use that for getting rid of annual weeds right when they're in the cotyledon stage. And we just sweep that. I'm walking like this, and I'm just sweeping. So it's very, very quick over the top. These are shielded versions of the same thing with multiple burners. So you would just walk over the bed. This one's got the wheel mounted in the center. This one's got the wheels mounted out on the edges, so you're not over the bed. These are bigger versions. So this is an orchard setup right here. So it's a wagon that gets pulled behind the tractor. And there's two different kinds of propane. There's vapor, and then there's liquid. So these are vapor burners here, and this is a liquid burner here, so it's got a preheat, a little bit different. They're putting a lot of gas out, and this is set up to go right along those trunks, essentially. It's going fast enough that it won't actually burn the tree, but it'll burn the smaller weeds back right along the tree row. This is for going in between crops, so this is about 3 feet long here and less than a foot wide. and it is designed to slide right along the ground, and then there would be a crop that would go in between the two, and it'll burn the weeds between the rows. So the flame is coming in down here, and then there's an exhaust here, so that the exhaust isn't going out and burning the plant that's running next to it. These are much higher efficiency, so you use a lot less gas because they're capturing all that heat down in the soil. Plastic. Does anybody here like plastic? Use plastic. So there's advantages and disadvantages to plastic. I don't really like it, but if you're going to lay plastic, it's very very difficult by hand, but it's really easy by machine once you get the hang of it. So these two machines right here are plastic layers, and they both have spools on them. So this comes down. There's drip tape up here. The drip tape goes through a little tube, and then underneath the plastic actually gets buried in the ground so it doesn't come around. And then there's a roll of plastic. This one's got paper covered on top of it, and then that goes down. There's usually discs, so there's a disc there and a disc there that open up a little furrow. The plastic gets pushed down by these wheels here into that little furrow, and then these closing discs toss the soil back over top of it. So that's a fast way to lay a lot of plastic and drip at the same time. This is another system using woven wheat cloth, and this is in strawberries right here, but I've seen it used for other things as well. So the woman that does this, she lays it all out, burns the holes, pulls it all off, puts the drip tape down, then puts it all back on. She's covering up the pathways as well as the bed top, so she doesn't have to worry about that. And this is in a 2-year strawberry cycle. So this is actually a different farm, but this is what the berries look like after 2 years. With plastic, it's not a bad idea to, even if you're in a perennial system, to pull your plastic up and basically shake it off or sweep it off every once in a while, because otherwise you start to collect organic material and a little bit of soil on the top, and then things germinate in that just a little bit, and the roots can go through and push through that way. But if you're cleaning it off every year or so, then you won't have that problem. Oh, there's a slide missing here. I'm going to go back to this for just a second. I've also seen some people that do, so for a perennial crop that's in for a long period of time, but they want to put the plastic in later, what they'll do is they'll kind of slit the sides, and then right down the row, they're basically putting one piece of plastic here and one piece of plastic here, or the woven reed cloth, and then the slit so that you can overlap them, but there'll be a tree coming up here or a tree coming up here, and then they can just peel those back when they want to take them off or lay drip or fix drip or anything like that, and then they just lay it back in with the row. And I can see something like that potentially working with dahlias. Not dahlias, it's peonies. We grow dahlias. It would work for dahlias also. Okay, so a couple more cultivation slides. These are what I was calling side knives yesterday. I think I mentioned this. This is more of a standard sweep. These are belly-mounted tools. Just an example of an electric. People see this electric G conversion. Everybody's got G's. If you are interested in electric, Flying Beat Farm, I think, is who has the conversion plans online, and they're quite easy. Makes the tractor totally quiet. It's really plenty of power. It won't run all day. It'll run about half a day, so it's not going to some people have much. Flying Beat Farm. If you looked up electric G plans on Google, you'd probably find it, but Flying Beat is where it is. It's actually beet. Beet like the vegetable. Flying Beat, yeah. And actually, the guy that I heard discussion of the CoolBot, the guy that designed the CoolBot is the guy that designed this electric conversion, also, Ron Kosla. And the cool bot was so, I don't know if you guys know this, but the cool bot was so successful that he sold his farm and is just doing a cool bot now. This is a standard field cultivator, and like the rake that I was showing yesterday, it's got multiple gangs here. And I want to point this out specifically because it might not be obvious up front, but that's important that they've separated these gangs. So you get full coverage, but by having separate gangs like this, you get space between the sweeps, and that allows material to flow through. So if you were to look at it just head on, there would be a sweep across the entire thing. And if you were to put them all into one bar, then they would clog really easily because it would just be one solid sweep. But by putting them on separate bars, it allows material to flow around. So that's why those are set up that way. A lot of these also come with kind of a spike harrow behind and then a roller behind that to really smooth things out. So here's a picture of one that doesn't have a spike harrow, but it actually has two rollers behind it. And then these are Danish S-tines, so they're kind of a long springy, and they move around in the soil. That helps prevent any kind of hand, but it also breaks things up and has a really nice action. So these are designed for going just, maybe an inch deep to 3 or 4 inches deep, not very deep. You could maybe run them 6 inches deep in soft soil, but they're really designed for more superficial cultivation. Mowers. So these are flail mowers, and this is another mower that's made by rears here. The nursery industry is really big in Oregon. It's actually the largest segment of our agriculture in Oregon is nursery industry. It's been suffering a little bit recently, but because of the housing downturn. But there's a lot of nursery equipment in our neighborhood. So this is actually a fruit tree nursery called One Green World, and they have set up this flail mower right here to mow pathways, so they keep the sod pathway. And then I wanted to show you this specifically also because they've modified it in a really clever way. I think they have a cutting disc right here, so when they set that down, that cutting disc is cutting a slot. And then there's this side knife right here that cultivates the edge of the bed. So they're keeping a clean bed for the nursery stock, and then they're keeping really even edges on their pathways. And they're able to have a nice sod pathway so that whether it's wet or dry, they can get in to those fields really easily. And then they're also growing some of their fertility in place because they have clovers and grasses that are fixing nitrogen and collecting carbon, and then they're constantly mowing that, and that's going back into the ground. So that was a really neat system. This is the standard rotary mower, brush mower that's relatively inexpensive, goes fairly quickly, goes through pretty big stuff, but it has that tendency to windrow off to the side. This is a flail mower that's a really light grass mower, so not designed for bigger, heavier stuff, but relatively inexpensive.
George?
Yeah. Yeah, this one right here. I don't know exactly, but it's about 3 feet. They're pretty narrow. These are special narrow tractors that are specifically for nursery, and they use them in the vineyards sometimes also. And I think they're generally about 22 horsepower, 22 to 25 horsepower. So it's a really compact footprint, but it's a decent amount of horsepower. And I think that mower is about 3 feet wide.
Who makes
The mower is made by Rears, R-E-A-R-S, and they're in Corvallis, Oregon. Or I think they're in Corvallis. They're somewhere in the valley in Oregon. Might be in Albany. And I don't know whether or not Rears did the modification there or if that was something that they custom did afterwards. Spreading fertility. So the top left one is actually what we've used. it's just a cheap Scott lawn spreader, and we use organic material that goes through ours, and it's designed for synthetics, and the synthetics are a lot more concentrated. So what we actually do is we basically clip out every other hole to give ourselves more flow option. So I just go in there with a pair of diagonal cutters and cut out every other hole. So we spread all, and our bed, these are about 2 feet wide, and our beds are about 2 feet wide, so it's kind of a perfect width spacing. I want to set it up, though, so that it has better wheels, because it doesn't roll particularly well for us. The one on the bottom left there is a larger version of exactly the same thing, just a farm drop spreader. Drop spreaders are really nice because even in windy conditions, they put all the material on the ground, more or less. As opposed to broadcast spreaders. So the top right up there are examples of hand scale broadcast spreaders. They make, I don't have a picture of it, but the cone spreaders on the back of tractors are very common. And those are a broadcast spreader where they basically have these plates right here that spin. So that, I call these belly grinders up here because you're cranking and that's spinning the plate. And in that spinning plate, the material falls onto that and it flings it out into a wide pattern. So you can use these for spreading fertility. We use them for spreading cover crop seed more often. And they'll throw about 20 to 40 feet depending on what size seed and what the wind conditions are. So you can walk down a field relatively quickly and cover a lot of space just with that. And then you need to work it in with if it's clover, we don't actually work it in, but if it's anything else, we work it in with the tractor.
Is that a backpack? Is it?
No, these actually sit on your front. So the strap goes over your back, and you sit on your front, and you're cranking like this, and you're walking forward. And you want to wear gloves because if you're, especially if you're doing any kind of large seed, like we put fathers through here, and when I see your hands, they really hurt. Bottom right is a manure spreader or compost spreader, and they make different versions of this one. This one's a hydraulic ram version, but the more common one is a walking bed. They just have beaters off the back, so for spreading manure or compost, this is what pretty much everybody is doing. There are some other designs for compost that are more like the broadcast spreader, but they're less common in our neighborhood. On the cover crop seeding note, so these are 3 examples of ways of getting seed in. So the top left up here, this is a standard grain drill, and it actually has 2 separate boxes. So it's got a box in front for small seed and a box in back for larger seed. So the box in front would be something like clovers, the box in back would be grains. And then they just have a whole bunch of openers and discs and tubes where the seed falls down, so the planting lines of that. This one here, this is a no-till version, so this is designed to seed right through existing sod. It's really heavy, and it's got these heavy opening discs up here, and then these spring-loaded openers back here. This one on the left, this is one of the things that I work seeding in the field. So another ring roller, but it's a double ring roller, so it kind of opens up a furrow and then closes it with this ring in the back, and that's been really fantastic. Brilliant actually makes a seeder that's very much like this, except that it has the seed box in between the two, and so between those 2 sets of rollers, it drops the seed, and they use that a lot in the grass seed industry, seeders like that. They work well between like that sod that was seeded in the nursery that I was showing, or in vineyard situations and that kind of thing. They'll use seeders like that for cover crop. Here's a real narrow setup grain drill. So that one was for experimental plots, was what that one was set up for. Also from the nursery industry, this is a very heavy disc, but it's super, super narrow. So I think this one's also, I think it's less than 3 feet wide, actually. So if we're going in between nursery plantings. So if you wanted, so for example, if you had your perennial plantings in rows, but you want to go between those and work that ground up in a narrow situation, this is what this is. and then they put these guards on the side so that the plants don't get sucked into those discs. They actually put guards, you can't see it in this picture, but they put guards on the sides of the tractors also, so there's basically these sheet metal guards right along the sides of the tractor so that the wheels don't catch any of the plants. Top left up there is just a fertilizer spreader, and actually, so they would be driving down between the rows of plants, but then they would flip these down, and then those would deposit the fertilizer just right alongside the plants. And this is the hopper right here, so that's where the fertilizer is coming out of. Those hoppers, you can get them so that they're PTO powered, or you can get them hydraulic powered, or you can get them electric powered. This is an electric one that's been mounted on the front of a tractor, and he just has the controls in the cab of the tractor to change to turn it on and off, and to change the rate that's coming out. Here's that same one that's been mounted on the back of a chisel plow that also has a springtime rake mounted behind that. So they're chiseling, then they're putting down the fertilizer, and then they're kind of raking that fertilizer into the surface. On a totally different note, this is a custom planter from the nursery industry, and very, very simple. They're just opening up a furrow. This is kind of like I was talking about yesterday with the potato planter that you can just make with the tube. They're opening up a furrow. They've got a space to kind of drop the plants in, and then they just have created 2 seats here for people to sit in. And then their wheels right here are mounted at a 45-degree angle so that they press the soil back in around those plants. And that also keeps the thing rolling along. And then they've got this, they just made this shelf up front in order to put the plants on. So this, for planting peony roots, I bet something like that would work really, really nicely. I had some people asking me about diggers yesterday. So the top left one is kind of the more common version for potato digging. It's a chain digger, and it's got this chain conveyor. So there's an undercutter bar right here. There's these coulter wheels which keep it from clogging, and then that's just dragged under the soil, undercuts the potatoes, and then lifts them up this ramp, and then that chain conveys. It's basically moving and conveying them up to the top, and then it's sifting out the soil and dumping a larger tuber on top of the soil behind it, and then somebody comes along and picks that up. These can also be set up to dump into a container, and then you just have to keep swapping out containers. The problem with something like this for something like peony roots is that the chain conveyor probably has too wide spacing and would probably catch with the roots. So there's some other types of diggers that would possibly work better. These 3 here are different versions of lifters. This one's kind of the simplest, a farm-made version. So it's just an undercutter bar. And what that's going to do is it's going to undercut and loosen it up, but you're actually still going to have to dig through the soil in order to find whatever it is that you're digging out. This one here is for digging tree nursery stock. It's actually for going on the back of these super, super heavy crawlers that they drag through the field. So this thing goes like 2 feet deep and loosens it up. And then they have shakers on the back. This one also has a shaker right here, so it takes a little bit less horsepower to drag that through than it takes to drag this through. And you can go a little bit deeper with something like that. So those are just versions of undercutters. This is a different version of that potato digger, but this has a basket shaker instead of a chain conveyor. And so that basket shaker is a lot more gentle on the potatoes, and this is the kind of thing that they use for onions and garlic, and this particular one is sold for potatoes, but will deal with delicate roots a little bit better. And so that basket right there is just shaking forwards and backwards and forwards and backwards, and the soil goes through it, but the roots don't go through it, and then it tosses them out the back like this. You can change the angle, and that changes how much soil it gets rid of. They tend to clog if you put them too steep, but it depends on the soil conditions. This is exactly the same. These 2 are the same machine right here. This one right here is the same company, but they make an offset one A lot of people grow potatoes on 2 rows, and they straddle both rows with the tractor at the same time, but they only want to dig 1 row at a time. And so this is offset. You can see the A-frame is over here, and then it digs, but it actually ejects the potatoes to the side, not straight behind. So a little bit different design there. And on our scale, we were growing, this is the potato digger right here that we had. We were growing potatoes on about 2/3 of an acre, and it was a fantastic digger for us. It really worked very, very well. This one was on a farm that's about 400 acres down in California, and they were growing about 30 acres of potatoes. And they told me that that machine would last them about 30 acres before it self-destructed. So they had a whole lot of them. So I kind of figured, well, on 2/3 of an acre, that machine would last us, 45 years or something? So that wasn't too bad. Drip tape. Do people up here use drip tape? T-tape? So this is I got this design from a farm that I worked on in Connecticut, and I've played with it a bunch, but it's basically a really easy way to retrieve drip tape. And even if we're getting rid of the drip tape, this is the way we pull the drip tape out of the field because it's faster and it makes a really small package. So all you need is for each bale is a piece of PVC. So there's basically a PVC spool in the center, usually like 2 to 3 inch pipe, something like that. And then this is all rolled up. So that'll hold, it depends on the weight of the drip tape, but that'll hold, for us it holds about, 3,000 feet when we roll it back up. It doesn't roll up quite as tightly as when you have a brand new. So there's some tricks to using this. I've written articles about it. It's very, very simple to build out of just some basic plumbing parts and wood. And this is one mounted on an early version of that farm cart. And that's what the bale looks like in the end. So, and if you want to reuse it, you have to be very, very careful about tying it up properly, because if it falls apart, then it's just a big tangle and it'll never recover. And,
Why is that real mount that direction? I would have thought it'd be mounted 90 degrees from
on this right here?
Right.
Right, because you're moving from one bed to another, right? And you're pulling the tape out of the bed. So you're just standing at one end of the bed and you're cranking and rolling it up.
Going down the road.
You're not going down the road, yeah. You're just standing at one end of the row and you're just cranking it, reeling it all in, and then you roll to the next bed and then you crank and reel it all in. So that's why it's not.
So Josh, how do you get it from off the disc into that third photo?
You'll have to read the article, but basically very carefully is the answer. Yeah, you just drop the twine. You just drop the twine down the center. You take one of these.
I'm not worried about the twine. I'm saying, how do you get it off that?
Yeah, these things they spin off. So one side spins off. You spin one. You put it on its side. You spin one side off. So you spin this one off, and then you can drop the twine down the thing, and then just very carefully lift that. So this comes apart. I think that's what they're asking.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Moving materials around. Somebody described farming to me once as moving piles. And I think that's actually pretty accurate. You just move piles of stuff from one place to another. So these pack forks, we use these pack forks for a lot of different things. Here's one example. So we use them for moving trellising material for our T-posts. And then it makes a nice, this is not OSHA approved, but you have to be very careful, good communication between the driver, but it makes a nice platform for the person to stand on who's pounding the posts also. Four-wheeler with a permanent pallet attached to it. And then really common in our neighborhood is these simple trailers that they pull behind tractors for moving stuff in and out of the fields. More material handling stuff, so forklifts and skid steers with forks and tractors with forks, super useful. This is, I wanted some apple crates, so these are 4x4 boxes that basically are sitting on a pallet so you can pick them up and set them down. I wanted them, they were too expensive, and I figured out a way to use a sheet and a half of plywood and just a little bit of 2x4 in order to build my own. They're still not cheap, but super useful, and you can, if you've got a fork that'll do it, you can stack these to depending on how much weight is in them, you can stack them kind of unlimitedly high. And so we use that for all kinds of harvest stuff. And we'll drive the tractor out in the field. We can have forks on the front, forks on the back, 2 of these bins going down, people loading the bins, and then drive them straight back to the barn, unload them exactly where we want them, minimal handling. I didn't put it on here, but there's also bin trailers that typically hold 4 of these bins plus, and the tractor pulls that trailer, and then there's just a little hook on the end, and they basically unlatch that hook, and all 4 of them roll out onto the ground. So that's a faster way to load and unload bins in the field using bins. A farmer showed me these a while ago, so this isn't a very good picture of it, but this is a hand truck pallet. So it's just a little piece of plywood that's got 2 furring strips on the bottom, so that the hand truck nose can slide in there really easily. And for us, we're handling food, and so you never want stuff touching the ground once it gets into the barn. So these kind of double as an easier way to get stuff on and off of hand trucks, but also something to keep stuff off of the ground. So that's a little idea. I think this might actually be my last slide. This is this slide in here because a lot of what I found is that it's a lot of the tools that you want aren't available, or maybe are available but you want a slight modification to them. And a lot of people have woodworking equipment, and wood is fairly easy to work with. So a basic skill saw and a jigsaw and a drill driver, and you're pretty well there. Metalworking is a little bit bigger hurdle for a lot of people, but it's actually not. It's got some you got to be a little bit safety aware in the woodworking department. You got to be a little bit more safety aware in the metalworking department, but it's not that difficult. And I learned to weld at a community college. They had a fantastic program. I just took a few weeks of a lot of practice going in the shop and laying down lots and lots of beads, but I can stick 2 pieces of metal together and they'll stay stuck together for a year or 2, and that's pretty good. I usually want to do something different after that amount of time anyway. And so really simple set of tools that kind of gets you started in that direction is basic welder. So this is a stick welder here, which maybe $300 brand new, something like that. You can find used, relatively small. You can do a little bit bigger material with that. Stick welding is definitely a little bit more difficult to learn in terms of just takes more practice. They now make these MIG welders, which you can plug into a regular socket, and you don't do real thick material, but you can layer the beads one after another and actually put together something relatively thick. And you can almost just pull that out of the box with no practice at all, and put down a bead that will stick metal together and stay stuck for very long. But very, very simple to learn and to use, the newer MIG welders. A grinding wheel is, an angle grinder right here. This one doesn't actually have the wheel on it, but it's been worn off. But for preparing surfaces and for grinding away excess material, kind of essential. A bench grinder is really nice to have, but if you have an angle grinder, the bench grinder doesn't always need to be there. And then super, super messy, but very effective, an abrasive chop saw for cutting material into lines. It's very useful. And we've saved tons and tons of money over the years, and a lot of time just by having the angle grinder and the welder and being able to fix minor tractor and implement brakes. We'll have little pieces that break that, it's like this stupid part that probably is going to cost you $5 to go to the store, but then you're going to have to order it, and it's going to take you 2 weeks to get it, and you're running your tractor, and go out there and stick it back together with the welder, and didn't take any time at all. It cost me $300 for the welder and another $50 for the angle grinder or something like that. But the amount of time that it saved me was definitely worth it. So, any questions on? Let me see if I got. Yeah, so that's the last slide. Any questions on any of those slides? Try to be more conservative today. So,
We talked about this, but paving, does that work on perennial weeds?
a small yes, but a big no. So, so the question was, does flaming work on perennial weeds? Flaming absolutely works best on broadleaf annuals. And broadleaf annuals which are small. So I keep mentioning kind of that cotyledon, maybe the first true leaf stage. That's where flaming is really excellent because you can travel super fast. What you're really doing with flaming is you are exploding the cell walls on the outside, and then the plant desiccates basically. It dries out. So when you first drive over it, or you first go over it with the flamer, unless you're paying close attention, you might not even notice the plant still looks alive. It still looks fine. So you have to come back like half an hour later, and at that point the plant will be totally dead because it's lost all of its moisture. And you want to do it in dry, just like any other cultivation, you want to do it in dry conditions. Windy is fantastic also because you want the plant to die as fast as possible. And plants die a lot faster when it's hot and dry and windy than they do when it's cool and damp and they can kind of survive on that moisture that's just around. So the other thing is that when you're flaming, if there's moisture present on the surface, so like if there's a heavy dew or just rain or something like that, the water is actually going to act as a kind of insulator, and so the heat, not as much heat is going to get to the plant as if it's dry out. So more heat is going to be concentrated in the plant if it's dry out. So you want to do it in dry conditions ideally. Now, the reason why they don't work very well on perennial plants or monocots is because perennial plants tend to come back from root pieces, and you're not killing the root. You're just killing the above ground portion of the plant. So they will work to knock perennials back, but they won't kill them. Whereas with annual broadleaves, they'll actually kill the plant. If the plant is big enough, a lot of annual broadleaves will actually sprout back from the roots also, or you would just have to put so much heat into it that it wouldn't you'd spend so much on gas it wouldn't be economically feasible. And monocots are the same as perennials, even if they're annuals, because the growing tip is underground. So even if you kill the leaves above ground, you haven't killed the growing tip, and so they're going to sprout back. So grasses, it doesn't work particularly well on.
Josh?
You know, I was going to say, we do our annuals with mechanical, and then we bring the roots up, and then I'll walk over the flaming real quick. We have some weeds up here that, like hemp now, if you put it on the surface, it's going to instantly sprout.
Yeah.
But we'll just go put weeding over or flaming over the annuals once on the surface.
And are you using it? What kind of flamer are you using?
I just got a little backpacker or the red.
Yeah.
Just walk along.
2 minutes.
I'm getting a 2-minute warning, but
Some questions might be outside your experience, because apparently Oregon doesn't have any of these, but how would you attack getting rocks out of there?
well, they actually make machines called rock pickers, which are essentially like a potato digger. But those are usually big and they're few and far between. When I was on the East Coast, we used to have an activity that the farm crew would do called rocking, and that was going out in the field picking up all the big rocks. And then the joke, which I tell all the time, is that there was always big rocks that would come back even after you went rocking, and it was because you left the seed rocks, the little teeny. There was one more question over here? Or maybe it was about rocks. All right, thank you.